All right, y'all. So we have been floating around in this world of like the blood of rebellion versus the blood of redemption. And we're still right on this street. We're still right on this street. I know I made some lofty promises last week or last time we got together when I was like, oh, and then we'll cover these words. We're not ready yet. I have this strong feeling that I believe is from the Ruach that we're not ready to continue moving in that area because there are some core frameworks, some core things that we have to work out as a people. And I have it's like a when you are attempting, as we all are, to walk out this walk and understand what we should and shouldn't be doing and what is and what isn't, there is the natural inclination to kind of lose focus. So it is my goal that whenever Yah does so with me, that I also share that with you all, is to bring things back into focus and into perspective. And so what I have this week is like a combination of a bunch of different things. So I kind of want us to just kind of focus. I want us to kind of like, really, I hate to be like, and just breathe and just breathe. I think just like realistically, as we're navigating, understanding what Yah expects of us, like we really need to kind of take off some of the mini hats that we've put on and really, really think through it. So this week, I'm going to give you almost like a logical progression of thought starting from a particular Bible verse, and we're going to work through some of these things. I'm going to weave in a lot of the questions, this idea of what we should be looking for, what other people are doing. I'm going to try to weave in everything. And my goal is this, and I guess this could be my title too, but what do we do when we're lost? See, a lot of times we don't know what to do when we get lost. When I grew up, when you were in a store and you got lost, right? You got separated from your mom, separated from your dad, probably because you'd have no business or you're playing in the clothes and they lost you or whatever the case may be. What we were told to do was, you got one or two things, right? Go back to the last place I know that you were, right? Or go to the front of the store. You know why? Because if I came in, I'm going to leave out. So if the last place you saw me was in the dairy aisle, then go back to the dairy aisle. But if all else fails, go to the front of the store and you wait for me there. I'm always going to come back and get you. And that was something I think that my mom and my grandma and other people instilled in me very early. If you ever get lost, go back to where we started from because I'll return to that same place and I can get you from there. Now, in my household, if I had the store call my mama from the front because I got lost, I just knew I was getting a whooping when I got home. So I was trying to stay with her as much as possible. I don't have too many stories of getting lost in the store for that very reason. But because that's a reality, and I think it's very much applicable to where we are as a people right now, I know it feels really uncomfortable, especially me or whomever else, I don't think I'm the only person saying, hey, we need to go back and look at what Yah said. And it seems like there's almost a little bit of fear attached to it, but then there's all this other stuff out there. It's like people have been doing all these things for all this time. What about this stuff? And so I'm going to hit on some of that and I'm going to jump right in with something that was said by one of, I consider to be one of a very wise man, which is King David. Let's go. And we're going to start off this discourse. This is not the only place we're going to go. We're going to kind of jump around today. But it's Psalm, I believe it's 11. I was going to leave it up. Okay. And we'll come back to this verse again. I mean, this chapter again, but we're going to kind of hinge our conversation out what I'm going to bring forth today that'll guide us in the rest of what we're doing with the blood of redemption and blood of rebellion on this thought here, this idea of what to do when you get lost. David asked the question in Psalm 11, and he says, if the foundations be destroyed, what can the righteous do? And that's a very, 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 very interesting question to ask, especially because I think we consistently make the assumption that there's zero attack on the foundations of what Yah has sought to establish. And the reality is, it's not just the foundations that are under attack, but it's the fundamentals and things that have been built upon that foundation that often and should be under close examination. In the ancient Near East, it was a practice of other nations and people to, when they went into a city, to raise it, that's the word they use, to the ground. It means to literally level it down to the foundations and then to build upon that. In some customs, they would cover the place with dirt and then create a new foundation on top of that. And so this wasn't something that was foreign to our ancestors, this idea that nations, or us when we were that nation, would come in and level a place and build upon those foundations or destroy the fundamentals altogether, especially when it came to wickedness. In the Torah, there is a commandment to destroy the idols and you go through all of this. It could be the cattle and the people and so forth. So this idea was not a foreign idea, but it did raise a question for King David as he is considering not only what he's seeing around him, but also the condition of people and how they behave in respect to Yah's Torah. So I want to start with this because I want to give biblical definition to what a foundation is. Because when I say things like we have to go back to the fundamentals of Torah, we need to go back to the foundation, all of us have a different idea in some regard of what that means. Because when we think of going back to something, we think of going to a system of something. So you have some people who will return to the systems of religion as they're seeking to connect back to God, not realizing that before there was a system, there was the Elohim of the system, and his way and his interpretation and those that he used to establish that take precedence over all systems that are built. And I know that's a hard thing, and it's something that I struggle with too, because I'm human. Looking out at the world systems compared to little old me and little old you, and saying, these systems are big. The practices of these systems are huge, and I'm being called upon by the Elohim of heaven and earth to obey him, even if these large systems that seem to reflect him or say that they reflect him do not do the things that he's asking me to do. Like, how dare I go back to the basics when there are thousands of years of practice amongst people and religions, and I say I don't agree with that religion and that practice, even if that religion and that practice says that they heard from God? That is a tall order for any human to take, and that is a tall order also for me as a mere human to come to you all and say this is something that we need to undertake. But I'm going to show you, this is my goal, if Yah says the same, how this practice that I'm asking us to participate in as we look at Torah, as we look at and challenge the systems, how it's consistent and it's thematic throughout the whole text, and why it is an imperative to surviving these days that we're in. Doesn't matter if there's 10 billion people, there's only 8 billion, but 10 million people in this religious construct. And these people say this, Yah has given us the framework to withstand that. We have the same framework that Hananiah, Azariah, and Mishael and Daniel had, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? And Daniel, that they had standing up against the largest institution, Babylon, the largest world power of that time, and saying, "O king, live forever." Meaning, like, I ain't coming against you. It ain't about you. O king, live forever. But as for me, as for us, I cannot do that. But I'm going to tell you this, where we have to get our girdings. And we're all like, yeah. You gotta know what it is that you're standing up against, because the adversary is crafty, and you will find yourself resisting God, resisting the Yah of heaven and earth, looking at what other people are doing and rebelling against what they're doing because you have a feeling about it. It's not either or, it's both and. If you don't think that the adversary that is seeking to snatch your blessing and steal your soul is not playing against every part of your trauma and experience, you are gravely mistaken. That is the issue of the counterfeit. That is the issue of the other nations. That is the provocation. So we're going to get into that. We'll talk about that a little more. All right. So foundations. What are foundations? The Hebrew word for foundation is interesting because it has a real applicable, like all Hebrew definitions do, um, practical definition that you can kind of put in your mind and never forget. A foundation, in an abstract sense, is a base, is like the setting of something. But the word it's shet, and it's the buttocks, it's the bottom, it's the butt portion. And it comes with this idea of something that sits on something. It's the placing, setting something onto, down. This is the foundation. Why? Well, if you've ever seen a house be built, a house has a foundation. It has a base where everything that'll be built will then go up on top of that. So you need a good, sure foundation. Nowadays, they use cement or whatnot because the foundation needs to be able to hold the weight of everything. But also the cool thing about a foundation is if the whole house and structure burns down, breaks down, is destroyed, it is assumed that the foundation will be in place so that a house can be built, with the same blueprint and same structure every single time it needs to be reestablished. So it's not a scary thing. It's not yes, it's traumatizing to see a house come down and so forth. But the reality is because of the foundation and because of the blueprint that exists, a person can come back and build the same exact house, right? In shape and function, right? You might change your windows or whatever, but the thing is you can build the same exact space again. And if you want to get a visual picture of that, right? And you can even talk about the elevation of design, if you will. The pattern for the tabernacle that was given from Shamayim to Moshe, right? When he constructed the tabernacle in a temporary sense, it was done with lambskins and this and so forth. And it had a foundation, it had the articles for the temple. When it was put on King David's heart, because he actually wanted to build a house for Yah first. And Yah said, no, 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 you can't do that. You got bloody hands, bro. And so he collected all the articles, collected the gold and the spoils, and made covenants so that they can get wood from different places because of the conquest that he did. And he brought the nation to a place of peace. And then he had his son, Shlomo, Solomon, right? Who then, in his wisdom and in his understanding of what Yah had, and Solomon then made these vessels and he outlined things in gold and he built this permanent structure based upon the foundation of what was given from Shamayim to Moshe. And then Solomon then just went crazy. Even not went crazy. I should preface that because that could be misread. Yes, he did do some crazy stuff, but I meant went all out on the design, right? And so we see in that, though, what Yah does is Yah is no respecter to the building. When Solomon asked Yah to bless this place, Yah agrees, but then he goes back to the fundamental for the even having a place. And he's like, but if these people don't obey me, foundation is obedience to my word. It's not this building. The foundation, the only reason why there is a Mishkan, right, is so that I can have my presence amongst the people as I establish this until I can then be physically with them as I was in the wilderness. He says, if they don't, I will destroy this building. The destruction of the building, the destruction of what was built according to the blueprint doesn't destroy the blueprint. And so when we're asked to, as I'm asking you to look through, read, and challenge, we have to understand that. All right, so the word for foundation is shet, and it means foundation, base. It also means the purpose of. It also means to ordain and to put in a particular position. It literally can be defined as the seat where everything rests. The foundation is key, and the foundation of Torah has not been removed. When you understand what a foundation is, things built on a foundation can be torn down and rebuilt over and over again. That is why truth is constantly brought to the threshing floor for evaluation and valuation. Now, I use that term threshing floor, and if you didn't, that didn't ring a bell immediately. The threshing floor is the place actually where the foundation was laid for the building of the temple. It was on Ornan's threshing floor that Yah, right, showed up, and then David does a whole thing, and he's like, "Oh, I'm gonna buy this place where this happened." The threshing floor is a place where things are brought to be trodden out, to be examined, and then to be found as if they're truth. David, masterful. I mean, we get it from his writings. Like he came and asked to buy that place, and that's where the temple, the one that we have in scripture, it was built on that threshing floor. Okay. So essentially, that is the process of study, is essentially the submission of everything to be examined to see if it can be consumed. All right, let's get to that next word, because it's if the foundations be, and then the next word I'm going to go to is removed or destroyed. And let me just make sure I can see my screen. Okay, so it says if the foundations be destroyed. The Hebrew word here for destroyed is also a really interesting word. The idea of destruction here in the text means to demolish, to destroy, to ruin, to be broken. And we see definitions of what it means to be broken through in Exodus 19:24. And so this idea of destroyed is literally what it sounds like. It means to tear down, to thrust through, to break away, to be overthrown, to be brought to ruin, to annihilate. So the question that David had was, what do we do when the foundations, the things that we hold to be fundamental and true, we don't have access to anymore because, let's say, somebody else has them, or somebody else has torn them down and built their own structure upon them. We've seen that, over and over and over again. And what is interesting is this. In the beginning of this, so I said we'll go back to it, David answers the question starts the discourse with the answer and then asks the question and then goes on to respond. So he starts off with, in Yah put I my trust. And then he talks to himself. He says, how say my soul? He's like, how can I say to myself, my soul, flee as a bird to your mountain? For lo, the wicked bend their bow, they make ready their arrow upon the string, that they may privily shoot at the upright in heart. And he goes then, and if the foundations were be removed, to him, he's like, what can the righteous do? And the response that he responds to with himself is, Yah is in his holy temple. Yah's throne is in Shamayim, and his eyes behold, his eyelids try the children of men. Yah trieth the righteous, but the wicked and him that loveth violence, his soul hateth. Upon the wicked he shall rain snares, fire and brimstone, and a horrible tempest. This shall be the portion of their cup. For the righteous Yah loveth righteousness. His countenance doth behold the upright. So I'm going to give you the beginning, the end from the beginning, so that we all get it. The reality and the answer to the question of what do we do when the foundations are destroyed is we understand that Yah runs the whole world. There is nobody doing anything or getting away with anything that Yah has not seen, Yah has not taken account of, and Yah is not going to deal with. So that in itself should give us a big, okay, that's true. So deception, darkness, wickedness, destruction, moving of boundaries, destroying foundations, Yah has taken account of all of it. This is where this part comes in, though. And I'm shifting from other people. I'm shifting to us, and you guys may not like me after this. Now, this comes the issue with us and the reality of that. And the reality is, now that we know that is true, what frameworks has Yah given us to be able to constantly come back to his word? If we all agree that Yah is in control of everything, including us and including everybody. He says, I am the one. I'm allowing this. And that's hard. That is a hard reality to come to when we look at the world. That's hard to stomach. I sat this week and I was just like, whoo, yeah, I don't know. And this is why a lot of people will say, I don't know if I believe this then. I don't know if I believe in Yah. Because in my ability to process and understand, this is not fair. It doesn't make any sense and so forth. And we get caught up in that. But remember, that is not our business in the sense of what we have to do with our job while we've been put here from the very beginning. When he separated chaos and made it order and so forth, was to respond to him. All that happened prior to us, you want to talk about the fall and this and that with Hasatan and the rebellion, all of that happened before we were even brought into play, which means that there's a system that was in play, and there's a system that's in play that really has nothing directly to do with us unless we decide to engage with it, which is dangerous, right? So looking at what David said, he asks a very important question, in my opinion, because I feel like that, and I think a lot of us feel like that. And the reality is what scripture says, and we'll get to some of these, the end game is declared out of the beginning. This idea that we want to pick up right now from captivity and move forward is not it. That's not how it works. We can't be like, okay, where am I right now? What does that mean for me right now? Yah is not concerned with right now. And it's so evident throughout his text. I don't care that you're in captivity. I'm going to prove that. I don't care that that was your traumatic experience. You got to let that go. You have to return back to the foundation and start from there. And that is hard because it makes us feel like we're going to lose a bunch of time. The reality is this: we have been given, and it's so cool, I guess. We have been given fundamentals. My mom, I think I told you all, my mom is a hairstylist, and she always talks about people in the practice. And she says, when you see a person's hair and the hairstyle, like they've had it done and it doesn't look finished, it's because there's no foundation to the hairstyle. And oftentimes they'll tell you a haircut, the base makes a good hairstyle. You want a bob? Well, your bob's going to look like a triangle if the bob is not cut. If you don't get the ends right, it's not going to look like what you want it to. You can have the length of a bob, but it's not going to lay and flow like a bob. Also, a fundamental of good hairstyle is good hair care, right? That's just the reality. The same thing is true with scripture. I'm going to hit on this, but I'm not going to, I told you, go back and forth between what it means to understand, if you will, these fundamentals. One of the key things I need you guys to understand is when you're reading scripture, I say it a lot, but I'm gonna hit one right now. The culture and context of when things are written. For instance, just bear with me because I know it's like a earth shattering, but it's a very basic thing. You go, didn't think about that. As humans, when we read scripture, we always bring it right where we are. It's a natural tendency. What does that mean for me right now? Before you do that, though, you have to think about what it meant for the person as they were writing it or saying it, especially when you talk about somebody like David, the Psalms, the prophets, and so forth. So here's one. We have this thing that we do, right? And we say it, we're like, I believe God's word. When people came into this walk, they're like, I know what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to obey the laws, statutes, and commandments of the Most High, right? That's just what's rattled off. What does a Hebrew do? What is his word? It's interesting because a lot of times we'll say things, but then we'll override those things with information that we have from right now or from our experiences that are inconsistent with that time. I'll give you one. Psalm 119 is a perfect example of this. Psalm 119, everybody loves it. They're like, oh, I love your word. Your word is this. Your I'm going to ask a very fundamental question. You can throw it in the chat. I'm not going to have you answer out loud. But when David is writing, this is going to trip some of y'all out, I already know. When David is writing about this word that he loves so much, this word that quickens, this word that is salvation, this word that is all of these things, what do y'all think he's talking about? Right? David didn't, this is going to trip you out. You know, the very first prophet that we get is a priest turned prophet by the name of Samuel. So David didn't even have, in the technical sense, a prophet to be writing based upon. All David had when he talked about my master will sit at the seat and all of those prophetic things that David is discussing are all based upon what people consider this very icky, I don't want to do it, so impossible law. This thing that he fell in love with. This thing that he writes about, your word is a light unto my path and a lamp to my feet. He literally calls it, I'm going to get to these. Let's go. He talks about the idea of being revived and quickened and resurrected based upon the only word he knew of. You don't believe me? I mean, y'all got to read Psalm 119 because if you want to talk about getting banged on by thinking, oh, this ain't what I got. Can't do that. So Psalm 119, I'm just going to jump because I have some notes of mine written down. Psalm 119, 107. David says, I got to go back. Let's go. Okay. Noon. By the way, noon is seed, fish, activity, life. He is writing the whole alphabet. He's writing the word that the language that created the word in an acrostic to give an understanding, his understanding of just how important the word that he had access to is. He says, your word is a light unto my feet and a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. I have sworn and I will perform it, that I will keep your righteous judgments. Then he goes on and says, I am afflicted very much. Quicken me, bring me back to life, bring life into me. Hayah, me, oh yeah, according to your word. What word did he have? Right? Except I beseech thee the free will offerings of my mouth, oh yeah, and teach me your judgments. He's like, even if I don't understand it, teach me. My soul is continually in my hand, yet I do not forget your law. All right. I'm going to go scroll down to Psalm 119, 170. And I had a different version that I shared with, I wish I could find it, but I'll grab the words in Hebrew. Psalm 119, 170. First of all, this is a lot to say about something that can be just cast aside. He says, let my supplication come before thee. How about this? He says, let it lifnecha. And then he says, and deliver me according to your word. He says, literally, deliver me according to your word. And my lips shall praise when thou hast taught me your statutes. So he literally says, pull me out, save me according to your words, and my lips shall, literally, my lips shall utter your praise when thou hast taught me your statutes. Now that is, I'm just saying, that is a profound thing to be delivered, if you will, according to the word. To be delivered according to the word is not some small thing. And when we talk about the idea that there's no deliverance or the word doesn't do X, Y, and Z, that's a dangerous thing to hinge on, because the only word that David had, if you will, that he could even understand as deliverance or as was Torah. So we have gone and we've bought this reality that, okay, this is like an additional thing, but it doesn't have any salvation attached to it. It doesn't have any. What do you think? the salvation that he wrote about, the deliverance that he talked about, was to be pulled out, to be restored, to be redeemed, was directly connected to this Torah. It's a very important, because what happened over time, and not to, cause any additional distress, but what happened over time is we have bought, and we bought it. It was costly. We bought a truth that we thought made something quote unquote easier. That is the deception of Christianity. The deception of Christianity is that you got a God, that you got a Savior that made it so that you didn't have to do certain things that God said. And it's sad, because I think we still, and I know I've been guilty of this too, we still hold to some of that. We still hold to it because we don't believe what the scripture says. We're still believing the doctrine that's embedded in us from Christianity. Because if we believe in Yahushua Mashiach as Messiah, and we believe the account that said he is the word that is made flesh, what word is it? I'm going to strip you out with this too. Guess what? The only word, the only credibility up until the time of Mashiach, right, was Moshe and the Nevi'im. It was the law and the prophets. It was the law and the prophets. It was the law and the prophets. Even what David writes, the only reason why David's writing gets credibility is because it's according to what? The law and the prophets. Everything was hinged on the law and the prophets, even when they didn't obey the law and the prophets. Why? The law and the prophets are the only writings that we have that speak directly as if Yah is speaking. Literally, and Yah said unto Jeremiah, or thus saith Yah Zavaot. That is what gives credibility, on top of the fact that the prophets prove that they're hearing from Yah by their prophecies being fulfilled. Their necks were on the line every time they opened their mouth. This is why fundamentally I consistently refer back to the law and the prophets, because they are speaking in a manner that, think of it like this. You've gone through Jeremiah with me. You've gone through. The people wanted to kill them. All they needed was an excuse to kill them. They wanted to. They were beaten. They wanted to take their lives. And in their discourse on why they could or could not kill them, they're like, dang, but the other prophets spoke like this too. And they're speaking according to Torah. They couldn't do what they wanted to do. If they found gall, they would have. It would have been easy. I can get rid of this person that's so annoying, that's telling me what I can and cannot do, and we could just kill him. But every time they would get, man, Elijah, right? They wanted to kill him. There's not a single prophet that we have that they didn't want to kill, and eventually they decided to kill anyways. That was that. So you have to think about the fact that this person is speaking. They're speaking, literally saying, this is what Yah said to the people. It's ticking the people off, and there's nothing that the people can do until the mission of that person is complete. That is what holds them at such high esteem. So when it comes to, when we talk about the word, we talk about the word altogether, then when we speak of Yeshua HaMashiach as the word, we have to remember that literally it's talking about a specific word. I say this too. This might hurt somebody's feelings. It hurt mine a little bit this week. I mean, what gives Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, Timothy, Paul, Peter, Yohanan, any of them credibility? Just sit with it. Just sit with that for a second. What gives them the ability to and credibility to write anything that they've written? Why do we hold and esteem what they have written? Are they prophets? Are they priests? Sit with it. We have accepted things because somebody said, I see that there, an eyewitness account or proximity to the word. They wrote it. They wrote it. There's not anything that we can confirm. We don't say, and Yeshua wrote this down. They have an eyewitness of account of what they say they saw. Right? So I want us to really, really understand why I'm pushing foundation. I know why I believe what I believe. I can answer these questions, and I've wrestled with these questions on my own, right? But cannot any person say, Yah told me to write this? We have apocrypha books, we have pseudographia, we have a bunch of stuff. How do you determine what is and what isn't? When people are like, have you read Jubilees? Have you read Jack? How do you know? Who told who to write it? Why did they do it? These are very, very fundamental questions, especially when you're talking about the word. A lot of times I realize we also do this. We will then base our understanding of what Mashiach has written down that he's said and did based upon what Paul, Peter, John, and other people have written. That's backward scholarship. You cannot get credibility downriver. It's not how that works in this book. The end is declared out of the beginning. It's declared from the foundation. I'll also give you this just to kind of push you off the ledge. The writings and timeline, right? Talking about culture and context. The timeline of the New Testament and the writings of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, they are written after Mashiach. When they're compiled and put together, now the event had to happen, but what is encapsulated is after. So then how do you make credibility for something that happened after the foundation of everything, after, if you will, the closing of what people call the Old Testament, the end of the prophets? How do you find foundation in that if you don't know the foundation? That means that anybody can come along and say anything. How do you know? How do you know that the word should be made flesh? How do you know that Yah said he would? So we're holding and grabbing onto things and then basing our assumption of everything else in the world based upon what feels good. And oftentimes it feels good because this particular thing allows me to behave in a particular way that's inconsistent with everything that everybody had to do here as it pertained to the word. All right, now that I've made everybody nice and uncomfortable, now let's get into what really is what. Okay, so we have foundations. Now let's look at the law, statutes, and commandments. And then I'm gonna share with you, and actually I'll go here first. I'm gonna go all the way to the end. Very last prophet that we know, that we're told, is the prophet Malachi. I read Malachi this morning and it like left my hand shaking. And I'll tell you why. It has a lot to do with where we are right now. I also have to add this too. I think this is a perfect plug for this. When we talk about religious structures, well, I tell you all, I am non-religious. I'm not against people who are religious. I'm not against people who hold to religion. I think there are things that you can learn and pick up. I'm not gonna, I've scattered, right? But this is my issue with religion. And particularly as we talk about this, because I think none of us really are going to go, oh, I'm getting my information from Christianity. I think most people are like, I'm kind of past that in theory, right? But when it comes to Judaism, because it's the only functioning, if you will, religious structure that still says that it operates solely based upon Torah. I'm going to hit my first dagger at Judaism, which is Judaism does not focus on the authority of the prophets, which is why, as a religion, I fundamentally reject it. The authority is built off of the law and the prophets, but the law and the prophets do not have the fundamental last say. And this is why I'm talking about this idea of foundations. I'm going to say the same thing about Christianity. I'm going to say it like this just for now, so y'all hold your peace. The same exact thing is true when it comes to Christianity. The fundamentals of Christianity are built off of the writings of Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and Paul, and so forth. I'm not saying that both groups do not operate based upon the fundamentals of the law and the prophets, but there are inconsistencies in practice with the law of the prophets because of the religion. So I want to sit that there. So I'm going to sit those two things there, and then we'll go back to it. So Christianity doesn't focus on the law and the prophets, which is why we ended up with having a Messiah that we didn't feel like we had to obey the things that he obeyed, right? Judaism doesn't focus on, now this one, put in your back pocket. I hope you use it later. Judaism doesn't focus on the authority of the prophets. And this is what makes it interesting. So much so that they close up prophecy, which is why they can't connect what happens in the accounts, the historical accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, to the Old Testament, because in their mind, there's no more prophets. It's literally written after the greatest, no more prophets. I'm going to shatter that today, by the way. There's no more prophets. Prophets are done. There's no more prophecy because we're the authority now. Now, that's very difficult when you have somebody like Joel who says in the last days that your sons and daughters shall do what? They shall dream dreams and be prophetic, right? But if you want to be the sole authority, you have to shut down and quench the ruach on prophecy. And in doing so, you also want to strip and take away the authority of Mashiach. That means that Mashiach now has to come in authority under rabbinical law. This is why we need to know timeline. It says that Mashiach was born at a time just as the one I speak of. He came at a time when there was rabbinical law, where people had their own structures in place, where they had all of this stuff for a reason. We're going to get to that, okay? But I also have to hit on the fact that our ancestors, and unfortunately us too, continue to do the same exact things. We go off course and then we don't do proper course correction. What is proper course correction? Proper course correction is to return back to the laws, statutes, and commandments. What are the laws, statutes, and commandments? Let me give you the laws, statutes, and commandments by definition. I wish I would put this on this computer. I'll share this in on Patreon after. So, laws. So the law is Torah. Torah. I'm going to see if I can write so it makes it a little bit, give us something to see while I'm talking. Where's my board? Give me whiteboard options. Oh, there it is. All right. So we have, come on. There we go. All right. So we have Torah, right? Root word for Torah. Let's see if my, oh, it's not gonna let me write in Hebrew here. That's, let's see. Oh, there we go. All right, root word for Torah is yara, and it literally means to teach or to instruct. So it literally means to cast the finger and to point or to send. And the idea of doing that is to instruct a person. When you tell them, go that way, you're pointing them in the direction of what they want to achieve or where they should be going. And literally, if we could reprogram our brains from thinking of Torah as law, right? As like, this is what you do and you get in trouble when you do it. And but if it's instruction, with instruction comes an instructor, and a good teacher, right? The master teacher, if you will, understands not only how to instruct, but also is the best at pedagogical practice, culture and context and relevance that any of us could ever be, right? So in teaching someone something, it is not always embedded in the teaching that teaching is punitive. The only time that teaching becomes punitive is when the student is taught and the student refuses to perform in the ways that the patient, gentle, kind, merciful instructor has shown them how to do, right? So think of it like this. Think of Torah and instruction as instruction and guidance that comes from the best teacher, the teacher that knows the framework of the universe, the building of the human body, the function of the sciences, the responses of the molecules in the air to your very existence. And that individual then says, and I'm going to give you things to do that causes everything in heaven and earth to respond to you. And the only caveat is once you learn to do that, that is the expectation that you perform in that way. And in doing so, you are blessed. But now that you have the information, there also comes with the reality that when you don't do that, there is a consequence for not doing that because you know better, so you should do better. That is Torah. Torah is literally that in a nutshell. It refers to a divine instruction. It is literally like a parent who walks with you, and when you get ready, oh, you know what, we shouldn't do that. No, we don't want to pick the flowers. Let's look at them, because if we pick them, then they won't grow. If we pick them, the bees won't. If you see a nest and you're getting ready to, take it, take the eggs, but don't take the mother, because look, the mother can lay more eggs if you need the eggs. But if you take all the birds, then there'd be no more eggs. What a loving instruction. Those are Torah laws. Those are the laws of Torah that deal with moral, religious, if you will. In religion, I mean the practice of a structure that then leads people to Elohim. And it's to him. You practice to lead people to him. You don't become the gate between him and other people. And then there is the idea of civil laws, how to engage with other people. Oh, okay. So yeah, if a person, if your ox, gores another person's ox, you need to have some insurances. You need to be able to repair that, because that's going to cause some beef in the community. Just like if your car hits somebody else's car, we get mad when a person doesn't have insurances. So in the instruction that includes how to engage and how to live, if you're going to drive a car, have insurance. That's what Yah is saying. It's very, very basic. It's very gentle. But guess what? If you don't have insurance, you're going to get taken to court. You're going to get sued. You might lose your whole house, depending on the wreck. So these frameworks are in place because there's a broader system and a broader world that responds. For instance, Leviticus 14:2 says, and this shall be the Torah, the instruction of a leper in the day of his cleansing. We want the leper, we want the person that's diseased to have some instruction on how they should engage with community, because we don't want to spread disease. So while it is a gentle instruction, there are some boundaries and things connected to it, just in case the leper's like, I don't want to be in the house, I want to be a super spreader. There are safeguards around it. But the gentle instruction is so that the leper can also be reintroduced back in the community, and so that people don't operate and say, oh, you had that, you're out forever. Okay, so that's that. The next one is what we call judgments. Okay. All right. The root word, the word for this in Hebrew is mishpat. And the root word for that is, there we go, shafat. So the idea of a judgment is a judicial decision, and it goes based upon case law, which is what Torah is, and it ensures justice and righteousness in society. There are judgments all throughout the scripture. It's literally, the word here means to separate something, to open it up and carefully examine it, and then to contain it. That is the idea of a judgment. A judgment means to separate it out, say, okay, we're going to look at this, to carefully examine it and all of its intricacies, and then to close it up with final gate or something around it says, okay, this is how we're going to deal with this. This is how we're going to deal with this. That comes from a person then understanding Torah and then making judgments throughout history. There is the openness of judgments added into the structure of Torah in Deuteronomy chapter 17. You could only imagine, right? I'll give you a couple. One is the Lophahed's daughters. Remember, the girls come, the ladies come, and genetic lottery, right? Just the 50-50 chance of having a son. This is how the stuff was passed down. And there arose a time in that time where this man only had daughters. You think that Yah left that like that on accident and Yah just couldn't give a rundown of everything that would have ever happened? But the reality is the infinite amount of variables that can take place in community requires that there is a core structure, right? There's like these laws and instruction, a way of living that we then base all of our judgments off of. And so that wasn't something that caught Yah off guard, like, oh my gosh, Zelophehad didn't have any sons. What? Let's come up with something. No, it's left there as a training ground to teach people how to operate according to his word, but also so that people can understand that a judgment is only made consistent with Torah, with the way that Yah has instructed the nation, in this case, through Moshe. So when that happens, he goes, this is what you're going to do. You're going to give them land, but they have to marry within their own tribe so the land stays within their tribe. The judgment doesn't exceed, right, the Torah, and it stays consistent with what Yah gave to Moshe, which is that the allotment to each tribe stays in their tribe. If they decide to marry outward, they don't get to keep it. And guess what else it does? In the event that that happens, it's only one generation that it becomes essentially matrilineal, because after that generation, they marry a male and then it becomes patrilineal, giving the opportunity for that to then go back into the hands of the males who are in that tribe. Sometimes things happen. So that's what judgments are. Another judgment that is interesting and is the judgment to not pervert the judgment, judgment of the stranger or the fatherless, or take a widow's garment as a pledge. These are judgments. Why? This must have been something that somebody did. So the judgments are in place to rectify what somebody did that wasn't explicitly spelled out in the Torah. All right, the next one is commands. All right, so we have commands, and then you have the word for that being mitzvot. I'm sorry. Hold on, keyboard, come on. Yeah, mitz. Oh no, it's all out of order. All right, let me give it to you. It's mem, zadi, vav, tav. And the root of it is zadi, vav, tav. So a command, a mitzvot, is a direct command from Yah that must be followed. Got to know the difference. Even when it comes to, when I say I'm not agreeing with something, it's because then is this a direct command from Yah? What is this, right? Is it something that has been established, so forth. So these direct commands from Yah are like this. Numbers 15 and 38. Speak to the children of Israel, telling them to make tassels or tzitzit on the corner of their garments throughout their generation, and to put a blue thread in the tassels of their corners. And you shall have the tassels that you may look upon it and remember all the commandments of Yah. This particular command was a command, which is not, they're not optional, but they also are commands that come with a blessing for obeying them. This particular command was given after, if you go back and you read Numbers 15, it was given after old boy broke the Shabbat. And the reality of this is it was given after somebody tried to take something that Yah made a law and make light of it. It was like, it was just sticks, right? No part of anything that Yah says is to be made light. And so in order for the people to remember that Yah's law is not to be taken lightly in any regard, especially concerning something as simple as just resting, he said, now put these on your body so that you can remember my commands. And it was a commandment. It wasn't like, It was just instituted at that moment. How it even is written is almost like that happened. And then Yah came to Moshe. Yah literally said this. Moshe didn't like, Yah, what should we do about that? Yah came to Moshe and said, tell them to do this. Tell them to do this, right? All right, another one is Exodus 28. This is not optional, right? When he says, remember the Sabbath to keep it holy, these are commands. These are like, it's not like, do I have to? Can we change it later? This is a command. It's a literally something that Yah says. Here's the word. Um, it literally is, let me see where I have it. It literally means to literally tell a person to do something. And if you don't, then it becomes you're essentially judged for it. And it includes moral, ethical, and even sometimes ritual or practical things. Okay. All right, let me give you the last one and then we're gonna hop back in. But I had to give these definitions because it's important. Because they're like, I don't know. All right, the last one is something called Hokim or Hukim, and these are called statutes. So people are like, we need to keep the God's laws, statutes, and commandments. So now you have all of them in one place. All right, so here, and let's hopefully this works this time. All right, so this is the root word, and sometimes it can be spelled with a hey too. So, and this is customs. So these are customs or decrees or things that are inscribed and appointed for a specific duty. And the whole point of these are to separate the people or separate them in a particular matter or practice. Now, what's interesting about these, the word also means to inscribe or to engrave. And these also refer to decrees that are sometimes not easy to understand. For instance, we have a few. Don't mix linen and wool. There's no explanation for that, right? Don't see the kid or thing. It'll say, it says kid, but it's like, or a young animal, there's interpretations, but don't see the kid. I'll read it like it reads from the translation that many of you had, in its mother's milk. That's just that. And don't mix the old grain with the new grain. Like it's just given that way. Another one is this one here. Speak to the children of Israel that they bring you a red heifer without blemish. Well, I gotta be red, right? You do it because he said, there is the understanding though that in these, right? That in these, the understanding comes in the doing. And even if you don't understand, you do. So here's another one. Leviticus 11, 7 through 8. We don't get a reason. There's no reason given. We've come up with reasons over time why we don't eat swine. Why even the cud and the hoof. And now people have come up with reasons, but it's not spelled out. It just says don't eat this because it splits the hoof, doesn't chew the cud. This one chews the cud, but doesn't split the hoof. And that's just it. We don't eat them because of that. There's all the other reasons, or swine or this, but reality is this is a hukim. This is a hook, which means that we do it because that's what it says. That's what Yah says, and we're trusting, going back to the law portion, that this statute is established based upon a greater understanding of the one who is instructing us in not only holiness, but also in how to be consistent with his likeness and image as a representation to the broader world and system that we've been chosen to influence. So those are those, and I wanted to give those because that needs to be understood as you're looking through what are considered the laws, but also as we look across here to how Yah engages with us and his word. All right, so take a breath. That was a lot. It's recorded. You can go back to it. And also, I see you all's questions in there, and I will definitely get to them when we pause. So don't think I'm like overlooking them. I see, but I love the dialogue. So keep going. Okay. So understanding. Now we know what laws are, statutes, commandments, judgments. It's important because sometimes people put them all into one big conglomerate of a category, not knowing where they come from or what they are. But this is the part I want to get to in giving that. There are always and have always been interpretations, understandings, judgments, And then this one is hard for people, and deviations from Yah's law, statutes, and commandments. It's important to note that. It's also important to note that they're written in the text. This is why we got the prophets. Samuel comes on the scene because Samuel was a priest. You had Eli, who was the high priest at the time, and they had lost their ever-loving minds. They had begun operating in a way that misrepresented what Yah had established, essentially in his laws, statutes, commandments, and judgments, as they had been given to Moshe. They were told not to eat the fat. They were eating the fat. They were told to not to just be sleeping with all kind of women. They were doing it, and they were doing it in a high office that misrepresented, if you will, what Yah was saying to the people. Every time there is a misrepresentation of what Yah is wanting to be sent out to the people, Yah is going to send people, somebody, prophet, to come back and course correct the people. That is his way. That's how he's always done it. And that is thematically true all the way back to before there was the law of Moshe. I'll give you some examples. And it proves to us this, that Yah responds to the human experience. Yah is not letting anybody get away with anything, but we have to be mindful of who, what, when, where, and how to sift through it. Here, I gave you Zelophehad's daughters, right? When during Jeremiah's time, remember when Jeremiah's time, when the people were just like buck wild, and Yah was like, hey, hold on. And he goes, let's return back to the fundamentals. If y'all just keep the Shabbat, remember that whole lesson? So Yah with his own law has always said, let's just bring it back to some fundamentals. Doesn't mean we stay there, but let's get to a starting place. Same thing is true with, I mentioned earlier, Solomon's prayer. Yah responding to the human experience. You had a human king who then enhanced or elevated, if you will, the construction based upon his divine imagination and will to do. Yah responds and says, you know what? This is a good thing. But if you think you're not going to obey me, I'll tear this whole thing down, right? So Yah responding and being present in the human experience. All right? Abraham and the destruction of Sodom. When the Malachim come, they come in to destroy. They got a mission. They come across Abraham, and guess what happens? He's like, man, if you would just do this, and there's this whole dialogue which shows that Yah does respond to the human condition, what's happening during a time and so forth. This is not outside of his word. I'm going to show you that in a second, but Yah does. It's naturally put there because we have to remember that humans, if we think about computers, algorithm, there is an infinite amount of possibilities that can come from any interaction. And so sometimes the interaction plays out, and then Yah responds in the human experience with what to do based upon that interaction. Okay? Here's another one that we know, Moses and the golden calf. Most people don't realize that what we have in the law, if you will, not the idea that there wouldn't be a law. So let me get you that straight, because Abraham obeyed Yah's law, statutes, and commandments. That's why he's considered who he is, right? So that's not a strange thing. But when it comes to the nature of some of the Levitical laws and certain things that were directly connected to the temple and redemption, right? Because they had just been redeemed, and redemption were a direct reflection of their interaction with the golden calf. So Moshe goes up to get Torah. So Torah is not this thing that we don't have because of a perfect system. In a perfect system, we still have God's laws. He went up on the mountain when nobody had done anything wrong. When he came down from the mountain, broke the tablets because they had gone into idolatry, he goes up, and then Yah's responding to the human experience by giving judgments and commandments that then have to do with course correcting what humanity had done after their redemption. Okay. And then, of course, here's an even easier one, Samuel and the giving of a king. Yah was like, I've always been Israel's king. But because of a response to the human condition, and then he does a thing, but in doing the thing, don't ever forget that. In doing the thing, it always ends up at the same end. Him giving a king sets a foundation for him being their physical king. He wouldn't have done something that wasn't consistent with his own end game. Everything that Yah does, both in punishment and in good, is consistent with his end game. I'll give you another one because this is one that I think will calm all of us. The idea of having a nation pose as his nation. That is a part of Yah's plan. He says it. I'm going to do it to provoke you. Because you're going to get so tired of not doing what I tell you to do and watching somebody goof it up that maybe, just maybe, you might do it. And just maybe when you do it, even if it looked similar in some ways, people go, now I saw that. But then when I saw that, that was that, right? You cannot see counterfeit unless you put real juxtaposed to it. But if we continually try to be counterfeit to not look like the counterfeit, then it never works and we both look like fakes. And then the whole nation looks like the synagogue of Satan on both sides. I see the stuff that goes on YouTube. I see the stuff that's happening. And you can't tell me that Hebrew Israelites don't look like the synagogue of Satan too. They doing all kind of weird, freaky stuff too. All kinds. All kinds. So then where is that towing the middle line when they wear fringes, they wear fringes. They wear what is it then? It is the obedience. Because now dressing different and making your own language ain't made us look no different when you get down to the nitty gritty. Because now you got sexual immorality, you're doing all kind of weird stuff, you're raping children, same thing on the other side. What's the difference? So it gives us the being provoked by a foolish nation is not just by the outside, it's by the inside too. What then will the righteous do when that happens? What do? You just sit back and like, oh yeah, y'all figure it out. Or do you say, I don't care if I look like you and you, I'm going to show what the difference is in obedience. That's the thing. You think we change I'm going to be called this? Doesn't matter. You get called something, Satan will put somebody over there to defile that. Guess what? Call yourself what Yah calls you. Do what he says to do, look like it, and that's when people will begin to see the difference. All right, so Yah responds to the human experience. So then the question is, how does Yah course correct and then bring people back to his word? That's the question, right? Scripture consistently tells us to go back. So we have, let's go to, I'm gonna give you these verses. And where's my screen? All right, I've been hitting this one over and over again, so it's nothing new. So you can just go ahead and write it down again. You're never gonna not see this from me probably ever again. It's stuck in my mind. Deuteronomy chapter 30, right? And he says, and it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse. Oh, no, we're going to curse. Which I have set before thee, thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations. Mind you, they haven't even gone into the promised land yet. And that already is prophesied that they're going to get kicked out, right? You shall call all this to mind among all the nations, whither Yah, your Elohim, has driven you, and shall return unto Yah your Elohim, and shall obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, thou and thy children, with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your heart, with all your soul. That then Yah your Elohim will turn your captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations whither Yah your Elohim has scattered thee. And then he goes on to say, if any of thine be driven out to the outmost parts of heaven, from thence will Yah gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee, and he will bring you into the land. And he goes through the whole thing. But I want to hinge on the thing I've been hinging on, which is the reality that it's when you return to all that I command you this day. I know some people are like, wait, but there's all these things. And then the rabbis have written, and these people have said this. And then I'm going to get you there. Just roll with me. I'm going to get you there. Verse 8 goes on to say, and thou shalt return, telling what has Yah done? How does he make us go back? And thou shalt return and obey the voice of Yah and do all his commandments. Now you guys know the difference. All his mitzvah, which I command thee this day. He's like, you're going to do the things that he said. The things that Yah has commanded you, you go back to those, okay? So just keep that in mind. That's part of the return. All right, I gave you the Jeremiah one when he was like, you know what? Go back and start. So every time there is a deviation, if you will, Yah says, literally, go back. Go back. All right. Jeremiah 6 and 6. I'm jumping around so you can write them down. Jeremiah 6 and 6. He says, oh, did I write down the wrong one? I got to 4. I gotta find it now because now I can't. All right. 6:16. He was gonna get there if I read it. All right, 6:16. Thus saith Yah, stand ye in the ways and see, and ask for the old path, where is the good way, and walk therein, and you shall find rest for your souls. But they said, we will not walk therein. Yah has consistently given us the ability when we are far away from the foundation, when we don't know the law, statutes, and commandments, that there is a thing to do. We go back to the old path, the good way. It is the natural tendency of the human experience to always want to move faster and not do so in a sure way. What I mean by a sure way is in a careful way. I'm guilty of that. It is in my base nature. It is in my base personality. I'm like, what's the fastest way I can get there? What's the fastest way I can make a decision? How can I move through this as fast as possible? Scripture is the ultimate practice of mindfulness because it makes you run through every single framework before you can move. And you have to start at the beginning. Now, you can build on that framework, but at whatever moment you begin building and it deviates from the framework, the whole building gets torn down. The whole thing. There's a story. It says when they were building the temple, it says then the chief cornerstone, that in the construction, now how true this is or not, it gives you an example because it says the stone that the builder rejected became the chief cornerstone. And the interpretation behind that is this, that the stone that was a chief cornerstone didn't look like what people thought it would be. And so in the building process, what people would do is like that stone is not like it's probably shaped weird or whatever, but that's the building block for the rest of the foundation. But because people kept removing the foundation, the chief cornerstone, the construction of the foundation wouldn't turn out right. And somebody was like, man, put that wonky piece in there. When the wonky piece was put in and they built based upon this and the structure was perfect, a lot of times what people have done is because we don't like the wonkiness of Torah, we remove the chief cornerstone, which is Torah and Yah's word, and we try to build a house and don't realize that the house is now slanted because the foundation is messed up. And so Yah and his word to his prophets consistently is like, go back to the old path, where is the good way, and walk in that. And in it is rest. It doesn't say in it is work, in it is terrible. In it, it's like, it's rest for your souls. Same thing is said in Isaiah chapter 46. These prophets all agree with each other too. Tell you something else about the rabbis they can't ever do. They never agree with each other, which is interesting. Something interesting about somebody speaking directly to a person is all of a sudden they all agree. What does Isaiah say? Isaiah is actually before Jeremiah. It says, declare the end from the beginning, and from ancient times the things are not yet done, saying, my counsel shall stand, and I will do all my pleasure. Literally says, how do you know what the end is going to be like? If you keep consistent with the beginning. You have to keep going back to the beginning to make sure that the end is right. Anybody that's ever braided, anybody that's ever done any kind of craft or anything knows that you keep returning to the look at the end if you're sewing something, so that the stitching stays consistent, so that the braid stays consistent, so that the pattern stays consistent. The idea of saying, now that these people have made these judgments, we just gonna pick up right here, is not consistent. The only way to even move in that way is to make sure that whatever you're picking up remains consistent with that from the beginning. If you have something in the middle, then you measure it up to what's in the beginning. That is how Yah has constantly brought us back, and that's how he's constantly restored the foundation. He's like, you will get so much further in the building process if you make sure that the chief cornerstone is in place, that the fundamentals are in place, and you try everything, than if you start trying to build rapidly on something that is not sure. You're going to eventually have to tear down everything you built and come back to the fundamental anyways. Here's another one. And this is probably, ooh, okay, let's do this one. Second Chronicles 7:14. All right. Everybody knows this one, right? If my people, which are called by my name, shall humble themselves, pray and seek my face, and turn from their wicked ways, then I will hear from heaven and forgive their sin and heal their land. Now my eyes shall be open and my ears attent unto the prayer that is made in this place. For now I have chosen and sanctified this house, meaning engaging in the human experience. But then he literally goes on and he tells him, I'm just going to keep reading because, okay. For now I've chosen, I have sanctified this house that my name may be there forever, and my eyes and my heart shall be there perpetually. And as for thee, this is Solomon, if thou wilt walk before me as David your father walked, and do according to all that I have commanded thee, and observe my statutes and my judgments. Here you have the words shamar, to guard, my hook, right? And my judgments, mishpatim, mishpat, right? Then I will, not, oh, okay, fine. Then I will establish the throne of thy kingdom according to as I have covenanted with thy father. And he goes on and he says it. He goes, but if you turn away and forsake my statutes and my commandments, which I have set before you, and shall go serve other gods and worship them, he ain't moving off of his word. I'm a pluck them up by the roots out of my land, which I have given them, and this house, which I have sanctified. He said, look, I made it holy. Put my name on it. I'll cast it out of my sight, and I'll make it a byword and a proverb amongst the nation. And this house, which is high, shall be an astonishment to everyone that passeth by it. So they shall say, why hath Yah done thus unto this land and unto this house? And they shall say, because they forsook the Yah, the Elohim of their fathers, which brought them out of the land of Egypt, and they worshipped and they laid hold of other gods and worshiped them and served them. Therefore hath he brought this dysfunction upon them. This reality of not going back to the fundamentals and just picking up is so dangerous. It's so dangerous that if you just pick up things and you don't look at them, then you run the risk of participating in things that are rebellious. For instance, it would have been quite interesting to me, just thinking about it, right? Our ancestors, when the tabernacle or the temple gets destroyed, right? They're so worried about how great it looked and how it was torn down, but consistently they kept trying to rebuild the temple, but they wouldn't fix their hearts. And it's so consistent with us as a people. We want to keep moving forward and progressing with Yah. And what the reality is this, we're just as bad. Take my camera off. We're just as bad as the rabbis. Like, I hate rabbinical Judaism, but what are we doing? If we haven't gone back to the beginning and have not seen what Yah said and we're not operating according to it, then you're making up your own rules as you go. You're making up your own judgments based upon the time frame that you're in and blah, blah. We're doing the same thing they're doing. And then we want Yah to bless them because we have Yeshua. That can't be it. What's different about us saying, oh, you don't have to do that. No, that's not that. That's not this. We don't, if we haven't gone back and seen what Yah said to do. So it's the pot calling the kettle black, and our ancestors got in trouble for both. We are not supposed to pick up where anyone left off. We're supposed to take everything to Yah. Think about it like this. Imagine Hasatan talking to Eve, talking to Hua, and her saying, okay, the whole conversation happened, and she was like, but before I eat this, Abba, is this edible? Like, I know you said, but should I? See, we get stuck on the story where we miss the lesson. The lesson is the adversary is never not going to stop talking. The response then in our behavior should change in, Abba, I see this. I see these people have this. I'm going to take it. Should I? Should I not? That is the beauty of the nature of David. If you guys have not read recently through 1st and 2nd Samuel, I implore you to do so. David didn't even get comfortable going out to battle. He could fight. Everybody knew he was a bad dude. Like, I don't think there was a person that David couldn't whoop, I guess, in that reality. But what David understood, while we could praise, and David has killed his, Saul's killed his 1,000, David's 10,000. David was like, but I know where my source comes from. David went out, whooped a nation. He inquired of Yah. Yah was like, sure, go up. You're going to overtake them. He was going out against the same group of people and going to use, he's going out to battle again. He was going to use the same tactics. And it was something in David that said, I know I won doing this last time. But let me ask Yah. And you know what, Yah told him? Actually, I'm going to give them to you, but actually do it this way. Had David used the same tactic, he probably wouldn't have had the victory in battle. But because he was willing to inquire to Yah, even when it's our natural muscle to want to get into a kind of like a autopilot, he wouldn't let himself get into autopilot with Yah. That's the beauty of the law, statutes, and commandments. They keep us out of autopilot. Because we want to say, how can I just get this down so it makes it easy? And it's like, I don't want me with you to just be autopilot. How many times in relationships have our relationships hit autopilot? And we like, dang, we just going through the motions. It's like, do you just do that because that's our role? And it's like, is the fire going out? Yeah, it's like, I've set it up so that in my word, because you have to keep checking in with me. You have to keep saying, hey, babe, you good? You thirsty? Well, last time you said you weren't thirsty, I'm not asking you no more. Yah's not doing that. He's not doing that with us. It says that he keeps a careful eye on us and he's watching everything and he's requiring us to also keep a careful eye on him. So when we get ready to do something, even if it's autopilot, even when it comes to eating, Yah might just tell you to fast. Eating ain't a sin, but he's like, I just want you to be a little more sensitive to what I'm saying. So I might just say, hey, don't eat today. I want to talk to you about something. And that's the amount of intuition we're supposed to have, but we can only be there if we're inclined and if we're not trying to be an autopilot with him. He might ask us to do some things that don't even really make sense to us, but he's like, I want to show you something. I want you to slow down when you're doing this. I want you to have whatever it is. And within other constructs, people do it all the time. Yeah, it's like, literally, I want this because he does not want us to make our own way. He was like, that's too easy for you to get in trouble. I don't want you to make your own way. All right, I'm almost done. I'm almost done. I'm almost done. He doesn't want us throwing out the fundamentals. He doesn't want us to just pick up the closest thing and rebuild. But then Yah has done things. That's why we have a written word. That's why we have the prophets and their stories and so forth. We have the human condition to be a judgment zone to say, oh, well, should I do this? Should I not do this? What are these people doing? What are they not doing? How is this consistent? How is it inconsistent? And we have that as a framework, and he's done that on purpose because the reality is we are supposed to have the ability to judge. But he tells us, one, go back to the beginning. He tells us to not make our own way. And he tells us to not choose a path just because it seems right or easy. Broad is the way of destruction. Narrow is the path of righteousness. Why? It's easy to just make your own choices. So we do have structures in place to do that, and we're supposed to test everything. It's very interesting, and I'm going to give you this end part. I think it's very important. When we're told to go back to the beginning, and then of course, when we get to Mashiach, we have some things that are in place and people have come to some conclusions. Our ancestors were wicked, period. Like, I don't even know another way to even like set that out. We had more bad kings than good kings. We had more bad priests than good priests. And in searching for Yah, we have framework for both to have an understanding. So this idea of like, oh, I'm just going to do what my ancestors did, be careful. I'm going to do what people who follow my ancestors are doing, be careful. Because while there may be some good things, those good things may be what the law calls fruit from a poison tree. Actually, our ancestors were called bad fruit, right? It could be fruit from a poison tree. One of the things, and this is more of a Judaic thing, but I want to bring it up because it's been brought up to me a couple of times, was this idea of the Great Assembly. The Great Assembly was something that was said to take place during Ezra's time when they were coming out of captivity. And it was during the time, and they said that Ezra, Nehemiah, Malachi, all of these prophets who were contemporaries were there at that time. And that's when they came up with these decrees. And that is where the basis of rabbinical Judaism starts from, in the sense of like these written down decrees and it being passed down. Now, of course, we've already covered this. There are things and human experiences that have happened there where judgments have been had with our people and they've been passed down consistent with Torah. This particular point, though, is interesting because there's this whole, like the whole experience that you see, which is Orthodox Judaism, Rabbinic Judaism, is built off of this. They'll tell you, oh, it's built off of Torah, so forth. But at the end of the day, it's built off of the judgments and the decrees that have been placed on communities, specifically communities that for a large amount of time, if we're just going to run it consistent, just for continuity's sake, from the time of Ezra, let's just say till present, When you take the people out and they get displaced and sent all over the world to the four corners of the world, there are then judgments and decrees that are not consistent with a unified house. And then you're saying, now you guys come back in and you exist based upon these decrees that were now created in Europe, that were now created out of this, and that we don't really know where they came from. Because after 2 Kings, about chapter 17, when the Babylonians and Assyrians get mixed in, stuff gets weird. Just let's say that. They removed our priest out. They had brought in Assyrian priests. They trained them in the ways, but they were never in the heart of being consistent with Yah's Torah. And then you get writings and decrees based upon these individuals that break consistency with what was given to David and what was given to Saul and maybe Samuel and so forth. So we as a people necessitate a going back in this time period more than ever. And it's not something that is inconsistent with scripture, as I've proven to you. It's constantly been a thing. So when we talk about this idea that when it comes to the Great Assembly, this is what the rabbis say. I mentioned this for a reason. The Great Assembly is before Mashiach. It's important to note. Timelines are important. Ezra, Nehemiah, Malachi are before Mashiach. The Great Assembly is said, just telling you what is out there, is said to have declared an end of prophecy at the time of Alexander the Great. This is why timelines are also important. People are like, wait, Alexander the Great during the time? The world was all happening at one time. So when you hear about Nimrod and then Cicero and then all Cleopatra, these people were alive at the same time as our prophets and our kings. The whole world was running. The beauty of what happened in the destruction of our people was that we're written into every single world power's history. That's why you can't get, if it wasn't for, I can't say that wholeheartedly. Maybe we would have been a great nation and ruled over all of these if we would have obeyed Yah. But in our disobedience, our story as Israelites is woven into every great empire, the Persians, the Medes, we're all throughout history. The Bible was not written on an island. Alexander the Great, and that time period, that was not written on an island. When the Greeks overtook them and then the Romans come down, they're fighting and we're kind of all looped, if you will, into this reality, right? We become a side story in their world, but in Yah's picture, it's a big story because he has a greater narrative happening. So much so that when we get to the time of Pax Romana, where there's peace because Rome is just killing up everything and everybody's all afraid, he sends this being, if you will, at a time, he sends his word at a time where there's the most recorded history. There's all of this, a perfect storm, if you will, of things. I say all that to say the rabbinic Judaism declares an end of prophecy at the time of Malachi. This is my kicker, so I'm gonna ease into it. Declares an end of prophecy at the time of Malachi, closing it up, no more prophecy, right? However, we talked about how Joel said that Joel and the other prophets had things that had not been fulfilled yet. So granted, these things still have space for fulfillment, but they're like, it's done. Prophecy's wrapped up. Who gives them the authority? There is a thought that, I'll tell you, there's a thought that it was done in Malachi, which has sent me back to read Malachi. But this is what's very interesting. Why do prophets come on the scene? The whole purpose of prophets is to maintain the consistency of Abba's word. That's the point of the prophet. When people think, oh, we got away with it, here comes a prophet that nobody likes to say, actually, no. And what is the end result when a person shows up, when people trying to close up what Yah say or say, this is what Yah said? They typically hate the person. I'll give you the beginning and I'll give you and you can fill in the blanks in your own sanctified imagination. The very first one, I guess I have to I'll start all at the beginning. The very first person that does that in action is Abel. Yah said to do something a certain way. His brother decided to do something a little different, and Yah judges on it. Like, it's just like, boom, from the beginning. He shows up as a direct opposition in his behavior and his obedience to Yah's word against what his brother does. But I think a better one, this is my first one. I thought about that one off the fly, but the other one I had was Joseph. Why does brothers hate Joseph? He's coming to check on the shalom of his brothers. Go check on your brothers. Man, here you come over here to look at what we do. And what were they doing? They were running off, messing with the women. They're supposed to be with the sheep, blah, 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 blah. Like they had something they were supposed to be doing. And when he came, it was so irritating. You about to go snitch, little snitch with the little jacket. You know what I mean? They didn't like that, right? So what do? You get rid of the person that comes to check in on what your piece is. Mashlomcha, mashlomek, like what is your piece? What you got going on? What is the wellness? What's the balance? How you doing? We don't like that. Don't be come checking on me. Why? Because you ain't got no business doing what you're doing. That's why, right? In the same way, you have, and I'm using this one, shameless plug, but in the time had an auntie by the name of Huldah, right? What were they doing during Huldah's time in Second Chronicles 34:14? They were operating in the temple based upon probably judgments and commands that they had just passed down, rules and routine, but they weren't using Torah. Oh, we found the book of the law. That's not a mistranslation. They found it when they were cleaning up and taking inventory during King Josiah's time. They hadn't even been keeping, if you read the text, and I won't say it as a collective, you know, there's always righteous people doing something, hadn't even been keeping feasts. They was just going through the motions, offering sacrifice, going in and out, whatever. So they take the book of the law, because they knew what they was like, take it to this woman and see if she'll give us an easy interpretation on what it says. And she came through and she was like, y'all not doing what y'all said. And because you're not doing what Yah said, this is what he's going to do. But as for that young king that has a heart of zeal for Yah and his Torah, tell him he's good. It won't happen in his lifetime. But as soon as he dies, Yah going to tear all this stuff up. That was also during Jeremiah's time. So they got a second account of the same thing, if you will. He has always sent people to he's always sent his people to remind the people of where they've left base, because we tend to, as a human nature, get into a routine and we'll start picking up our own rules and our own ways. It is always the nature of the people to throw away the fundamentals. Rabbinic Judaism has thrown away the fundamentals, even by adding. You'd be like, but they have all this extra stuff. You threw away the fundamental. You threw away what the spirit and the understanding of Torah was. We've thrown away the fundamentals because Christianity did one thing, they're doing too much. And so we've thrown away the fundamentals and started our own things too. We have not gone, we just literally picked up when we woke up and started walking and didn't say, what am I supposed to be doing? And so what is the responsibility during that time? You have to go back and see, because you could be walking amiss. You don't know, but just like, okay, well, I woke up and I think I'm supposed to be doing this. Do you know though? That is the human nature of it all. You just start walking from where you are. Nobody does that though. If you're lost, right? Everybody, the key framework of being lost is to go back to where you got lost at. And we got lost at the beginning because we've been far removed from Torah because of our captivity. All right. And I said it, but I'm like, sadly, we're no different from the rabbis. We just started doing stuff and then everybody started copying everybody. For instance, I'll give you one. During Sukkot, and we do one or, but not both. There's nothing wrong with staying in a temporary dwelling, but there's everything wrong with that not actually building a sukkah. That is a part of the commandment of Sukkot. And it has instructions, don't even need rabbis for this, in the text on how to do it, what to use. It's supposed to be open, supposed to have the branches from here, here, here. You're supposed to wave them. You are supposed to do both. You can stay in a tent, yes, but are you supposed to build a sukkah? Absolutely. That's the commandment, right? So we've done, and we just picked up and we walked. Well, everybody has a tent, so let's do it. It's not an either or, but we don't realize that we too are doing the same thing that the rabbis are doing. You picked up, you were in captivity, they picked up, they were, brought in by whatever method. And I think it's a mix of some things, right? And they just start doing what made sense when they were in Eastern Europe. And then we're just doing what makes sense because we're in captivity. And nobody is humble enough to be like, let's just go back to the beginning. Well, we've been doing it like this for so long. We have the ability to not end up like them. End up so far off that we've established all these our own things, and now nobody can go back and challenge them. Who can go and challenge IUIC right now to go back to the fundamentals of Torah? Who can challenge ISUPK? Who can challenge Sakari? Who can challenge these groups to go back to the fundamentals of Torah and really look at them and remove all the other things that they've gathered along the way and say, let's go back? You'll find out the reality of who you follow when you ask a person to go back to the beginning. It becomes abundantly clear because people don't like that. All right. Literally, we've created our own way and we've made so many of the things that we do, unfortunately, an abomination. And if you think it's just something new, I'm going to give you a couple of examples and we're going to end with this. Let's go to Malachi. It's a good place to go. That's where I ended this morning. Let's go to Malachi. And let's start at chapter 1, verse 10. He says, I have to go back to the beginning. All right, Malachi chapter 1, just to give you some context. The burden of the word of Yah to Israel by Malachi. Now, this is interesting because Malachi was said to be at the Great Assembly, right? When all of the judgments came down and when the oral law was then finalized and then put into place so the people could follow it. And based upon this oral law, that's how you get the Mishnah, the Babylonian Talmud, the Yerushalmi Talmud, and so forth. And Talmud just means the teachings. So, well, we compiled all this stuff with this group of people. Malachi is supposed to be a part of this group. Malachi comes through, though, guns a-blazing, right, in what he says. Now, the book of Malachi is written some 30 plus years after the Great Assembly. Timelines matter. So let's just say we go along with the historical account that Malachi, Ezra, Nehemiah, Zechariah, and the likes all come together after the release from captivity. And they're like, y'all done married these strange women, blah, 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 blah. We're going to put all these rules in place. And these are consistent with Torah. And we're going to finally write down the oral law so we can keep consistent on what we're supposed to do in practice. I believe this to be historically true because when Messiah comes on the scene, there is a rabbinical, if you will, or a law, oral law that is in practice that he is talking about. We'll talk about that a little bit next week. So I believe this to be 100% true on what the people held to. But because these men, specifically Malachi, is the closing prophet, if you don't catch anything else I've said over the last however long I've been on here, hear me out. Malachi is the closing prophet before we get the word made flesh, as we hold to based upon what happened in the book of John and Matthew, Mark, Luke, okay? Malachi is closing it out. He writes this 30 years after him and his bros got together and made the declarations and made the oral law solid for the nation. Yah comes to Malachi and he gives him something to say. He says a couple of things that are interesting. First of all, he talks about how, let's just go through it. The burden of the word of Yah to Israel by Malachi. I have loved you, saith Yah, yet you say, wherein have you loved us? Was not Esau, Yaakov's brother, saith Yah? Yet I loved Yaakov, and I hated Esau. And I laid his mountains and his heritage waste for the dragons of the wilderness, whereas Edom saith, we are impoverished, but we will return and build the desolate places. Thus saith Yah of hosts, they shall build, and I will throw down. And they shall call them the border of wickedness, and the people against whom Yah hath indignation forever. And your eyes shall see, and you shall say, Yah will be magnified from the border of Israel. A son honoreth his father, and a servant his master. If then I be father, where's my honor? And if I be master, where is my fear, saith Yah of hosts? O priests that despise my name. And ye say, wherein have we despised your name? He says, you offer polluted bread upon my altar, and ye say, wherein have we polluted thee? And that ye say the table of Yah is contemptible. And if you offer the blind for sacrifice, is that not dysfunctional? And if you offer the lame and the sick, is that not dysfunctional? Offer it now to your governor. Will he be pleased with you or accept you as a person, saith Yah of hosts? And now I pray you, beseech Elohim, that he will be gracious unto, let me pause. And now, and it's pretty much saying, and now you're going to pray that Elohim beseech you and be gracious to us. This hath been by your means. Will he regard your person, saith Yah of hosts? Who is there even among you that would shut the doors for naught? Neither do you kindle fire on my altar for naught. So I have a different translation that I read when I was reading this, and it was a better Hebrew translation. Literally says this: I wish that somebody would close the doors of my sanctuary so you couldn't offer nothing to me. So you couldn't just keep doing the same things. He says, I don't have any pleasure in this and it's not acceptable. Now, granted, this is a person who was there looking at the condition of the people, right? He goes on to say, and I'm just going to go down a little bit further. He says, neither will I accept the offerings of your hand. For from the rising of the sun, even to the going down of the same, my name shall be great among the Gentiles, and in every place incense shall be offered upon my name, and a pure offering, for my name shall be great among the heathen, saith Yah of hosts. The literal translation says, my name is great. Like, you have other nations who are serving me and are going to serve me better than you have because of how you feel about me. It says, but you have profaned it, profaned my name, saying, the table of Yah is polluted, and the fruit on it, even its meat, is contemptible. Yea, also, behold, what a weariness it is. And I'm adding that in before I get to this last part, because I need you to understand that the people, our ancestors, at the end had said, this is weariness. What a weariness it is to serve Yah. What a weariness. Like, oh, it's just, all of this is just so difficult. Why would he ask us this? And Malachi is echoing this before, like after the great assembly, but before the coming of the word made flesh. Right? Like there's so much here. But I want to end with, now that you understand that the way that the people thought, the way that they were thinking was so contemptible about Yah and his word. And it's so consistent. What's the difference between the person that adds to it and makes it grievous and the person that don't want to do it at all? So let's go down to, I'm just going to go to verse 7. I am just, please, 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 please read Malachi. But I'm going to read it from this translation. It says, for the lips, for Malachi 2:7, for the lips of the priest, the Kohen, should safeguard knowledge, and people should seek teaching from his mouth. For he is an agent of Yah, master Yah of hosts. But you have veered from the path, and you have caused many people to stumble through your teachings. You have corrupted the covenant of Levi, saith Yah of hosts. Therefore, I have also made you repulsive and lowly to all the people, because you do not observe my ways and you show favoritism in your teaching. This is the Malachi that people are like, he was at the Great Assembly. He was all for the oral traditions and all the extra stuff. I don't know if Malachi had a change of heart, but this is what I'm going to show you that he said when he ends his book. Everybody always knows, should a man rob God? I'm going to give you something, I believe, even better than shall a man rob God. The question is, shall y'all keep playing in Yah's face? Let's go down to the end of the, Malachi goes to 3 chapters in the Hebrew version. It goes to 4 chapters in here. All right. Malachi chapter 4. This is how it's actually at the end of chapter 3. It's the closing. It's the very last thing that Malachi says. Malachi being the one who was present at the great assembly, the one who is supposed to support the authority of what is said in the oral law and so forth and so on. This is why it's important to read your Bible. Read the scriptures for yourself. Come to a conclusion. Turn back to Yah. Go back to the ancient path, because at the end of what we consider to be the final prophet, this is what he says. I'm going to read it from here. I'll scroll up here too. For behold, the day is coming, burning like an oven, when all wicked people and all the evil doers will be made like straw at that coming day. And Yah will burn them up. Yah of hosts will burn them up, so that it will not leave them a root or branch. Okay. But a son of righteousness will shine for you, who fear my name, with healing in his rays, in his wings, in his kanaf, right? And you will go out and flourish. Now, this is Malachi, y'all, before Mashiach, after the great assembly. But unto you that fear my name, a son of righteousness, a son of righteousness will shine forth, who fear my name, with healing in his kanaf. Now, they translate it as raised, but it's in his wings. And you will go out and flourish like the fatted calves of the stalls. And you will trample the wicked, for they will be ashes under your feet on the day that I will bring about, saith Yah of hosts. Verse 22 here, but it's also verse 4 for here. Malachi, say it again, who was at the great assembly, who was supposed to have supported oral law. Oral law in its current condition overrides, if you will, the law of Moses, because these decrees and judgments have gone out and they should be followed. Malachi says, remember the Torah of Moses. And let me correct myself. Yah is telling Malachi to say, thus saith Yah of hosts. It says, remember the Torah of Moses, my servant, which I commanded him at Horeb for all of Israel, its decrees and its statutes. Literally says how it reads. That's why I said it in this version. It breaks the part where it says, saith Yah of hosts, and it acts like there's something else here. In the Hebrew, it's a continuation. And it says, and I will bring them, saith Yah of hosts. It says, remember the Torah of Moses, my servant. So that's not Malachi calling Moses his servant. Remember the Torah of Moses, my servant, which I commanded him at Horeb for all of Israel, its decrees and its statutes. And he ends with this. Behold, I send you Elijah the prophet before the coming of the great and awesome day of Yah. And he will turn back to Yah the hearts of the fathers with their sons, and the hearts of the sons with their fathers, lest I come and strike the land with utter destruction. That's how Malachi ends his book. And I'm going to go back. I told you would see it again. And let's just go back to Deuteronomy chapter 3. Talking about the redemption and who has the final say. Deuteronomy chapter 30. It says, and it shall come to pass, because now Malachi is all the way almost to Mashiach. Now you're thousands of years. This is thousands of years in the beginning of the writing. Malachi is all the way at the closing of the Tanakh. He's the very last prophet. And it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee. This is to us. Malachi spoke to us. Moshe was speaking to us, all by the words of Yah. It shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations, whither Yah your Elohim have driven thee. And thou shalt return unto Yah your Elohim, and shalt obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, that thou and thy children with all thy heart and with all thy soul, that then Yah will turn your captivity and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from the nations whither he has scattered you. It is important. It is with the utmost importance that you understand two things, that the word of the prophets and Moshe are what Yeshua hinges everything on. Let me see. Give you the verse. I'm planning on it, but I'm gonna give it to you. He says, ooh, yeah, that's how we're gonna end. Go to Luke chapter 24. And I think it's verse 27 I'm trying to get to. Luke 24:27. If ever a person tries to convince you, first of all, there is an inconsistency with Yeshua and Torah. That's an absolute no. Now that you understand what the word is, what the commandments are, who has authority, who doesn't have authority, what has been consistently said from beginning to end, and where you have to go to. You can't go to John and start off trying to understand. Can't start from where you are in captivity and try to interpret what Yah is asking, because he literally spoke it in Deuteronomy chapter 30 that whatever it is he's asking you to do, you're going to be able to do it from the places you've been scattered. You saw it in Chronicles. You saw it in Deuteronomy. That can't be the barrier. The barrier of going back to the beginning can't be the barrier. In Luke chapter 24, this was supposed to be after the resurrection. I'm going to go to 27. And let me go back. I have to get it. Let's go back. Okay. Okay, verse 13. And behold, two of them, yeah, okay. And behold, two of them went the same day to a village called Emmaus. Y'all probably heard this thing 1,000,000,000,000,000,000 times, especially if you were a Christian, especially during Easter or wherever else. I want you to read this with the context of the consistency of the word and who the word made flesh is and what the responsibility is then of understanding not only who the word is, but then how to go back to the beginning. And you're going to get your framework from the person who hopefully you are hinging all of your trust and faith in. You can't believe nobody else, right? But the word. And behold, two of them went the same day to a village called Emmaus, which was from Jerusalem about 60 furlongs. And they talked together of all these things which had happened. They talk about like, man, I remember when we were in Jerusalem and the. And it came to pass that while they communed together and reasoned, Yeshua himself drew near and went with them. But their eyes were holden, so they didn't know it was him. They were like, just whatever. And he said unto them, what are y'all talking about? And he said, essentially, what manner of communications are these that you have one with another as you walk and are sad? But okay, really? Man, why y'all walking and talking all sad? What's going on? And the one of them, whose name was Cleophas, said unto him, he said, man, are you a stranger in Jerusalem? Did you not hear of everything that just happened over the last few days? And he said, what things? And they said unto him, concerning Yeshua of Nazareth, which was a prophet, mighty indeed, and word before God and all the people, and how the chief priests and our rulers delivered him to be condemned to death and have crucified him. Now, mind you, the chief priests and our rulers, people always get that wrong. But we trusted that it had been he which would redeem Israel. And besides all this, to this day is the third day since these things were done. Yea, and certain women also of our company made us astonished, which were early at the sepulchre. And they said they didn't find his body. And they came saying that they seen a vision of angels and that he was alive. And other people said that they went to the sepulchre and they found the women and they said they didn't see him either. So then Yeshua says unto them, oh, you fools, oh, you silly people and slow of heart to believe all the prophets have spoken. He was like, you didn't even have to check there because the prophets had already said it. Ought not Mashiach to have suffered these things and to enter into his glory? Verse 27. And beginning at Moses and all the prophets, he expounded unto them in all the scriptures things concerning himself. All that there is concerning him, all the authority. He was like, y'all worried about what was said right now. Ah, so silly. If y'all had just gone back to the beginning and read and did what was said, you wouldn't be confused about right now. And you wouldn't be confused about who I am or what was supposed to happen. He said, she said, they said means nothing when Yah has already said and spoke explicitly about those things. We have to realign, focus our eyes. My favorite prophet, just bar none, is Samuel. Said that Samuel was in Eli's house. They were disobeying Yah's laws. They were making up their own customs. They were doing certain things, and he put his blinders on. My focus is on Yah. Everything that's brought into the front of my vision with my blinders on, something for me to examine and then say, Yah, what do I do with this? If Yah gives me a response, all right, he might say, you figure it out, whatever. That's the human experience. But our responsibility is to go back to Yah's laws, his statutes, and his commandments as they've been given to Moses and the prophets, because in that is our salvation because our salvation is that in the flesh. We don't have anything else. Our salvation is not some made up fairy tale. It's not some version that's going to come and disrupt something. Yah literally took Moses and the prophets and the writings that are there and the prophecies concerning himself as Redeemer, and he placed them into Yeshua. He cannot do other than what is there, which means that we cannot do other than what is there. Now, we'll talk about what the elevation of the law and what our responsibilities are now that there is no temple and now that we have propitiation for sin, but it doesn't change the necessary behavior and response to those things. They don't go away. I'll give you this because somebody might be like, well, what do you mean? One of the things that's consistent, not only through Torah, in the first 5 books, is the circumcision of the heart and the word being written on your heart. That's not figurative, friends. That's not figurative. Something cannot become routine without practice. You're not going to make free throws consistently without shooting free throws. You're not going to be able to cook a recipe good consistently without cooking the recipe, or at least having the recipe. So when Paul makes certain statements like the Torah was my schoolmaster, that meant that I went to school, guys. You cannot have a schoolmaster that you never went to school to study under. It cannot be written on your heart without practicing it. Can't know a number by heart without calling it. We don't know numbers anymore because we just push a button. But if you had to dial 559-246-0939, then you would, I have to cut that part out now. Then you would then know that you know that number because the number has stayed the same. Yah's not changing the phone number because he wants you to be able to reach him. The same way that his law and his word stay consistent because I want you to be able to reach me. The deception of the nations and religion is that they've come in and sought to transpose the phone numbers. It might be all the same numbers, but not in the same way, so you can never get your call through. And our job is to go back and verify the phone number. That is our mission. And we have Mashiach to do so. So after the destruction of the temple, you get practices, because he says it. Do you not know that the kingdom of heaven is within? What is that a setup for? That's a setup to mean that no matter where you go, you still have the responsibility of the kingdom in you. And so then when Paul says, do you not know that you are the temple of the Most High? That's a setup for what was already the case. There was no Mishkan. There was nothing when they left out of Egypt. All that there was were people and Yah dwelling with them. People dwelling in love with Yah to be made in his likeness and image. So no matter what happened to a physical structure, just as we saw in Solomon's time, and just as we saw with the destruction of the temple at 70 AD, no matter where the people go, Yah goes with them, because in the establishment of people, he set up that I made you in my likeness and my image, and I've chosen a people special to me before the foundation of the world, so nobody could have anything to say about it, and they will operate as my people, as my temple, and as my workmen, no matter where they go. So then what does Torah mean? What does Levitical law mean? What does cleanliness mean? Now that you know it's you that cannot be destroyed. And it's you that have been set as an ensign all across the nations. And it's you that is the redemption of the people as it was set from the beginning. Now what is your responsibility to walk out as Mashiach did? What is that responsibility to be found without spot or wrinkle and to be washed in the word and to operate higher, especially in a world where you have a nation who stands juxtaposed to us, giving off something else and literally pushing people away from Yah. We have a responsibility and we have to know what it is. And that's why we go back to the beginning, when it was given to our ancestors at the mountain. And they chose, because of their lack of understanding of what Yah wanted to do, to have somebody stand in the gap between them. Yah has said, I've taken away all gaps. It's me and it's you. What are you going to do? When we talk about capacity, this is something I've been really focusing on. I meant to mention in the lesson, but I'll mention it here and I'll probably have Tanisha share it online or whatever. Yah knows our capacity. You just mentioned that Yah knows our heart. He knows the capacity that we have too. The reality is Everybody is not David. Everybody is not Samuel. Everybody is not like that. That's the reality. Yah chose a spectrum of people. Gideon was considered a coward. He needed a whole bunch of, demonstration to do whatever would have been easy for somebody else. And what I want people to realize is just what you said, which is he does know our ability and our capacity. He knows our heart, if you will. He knows how far we can go. One of the things I want us to also realize is we don't get to determine that distance. Like we can't, and we can't determine it for other people either. So Yah knows, and I guess you'll know. It's like when you're when you're exercising, right? And your trainer's like, you got two more in you. And you're like, no, I don't. I'm done. Yeah, okay, now you got two more. Give me one then. You give one. Can you give one more? You're like, dang it, I can. That is what they say that the muscle is built at the end of the exercise, not during the exercise. And a lot of times we think about the exercise and it's like, okay, but guess what Yah will do? And I think this is also something, like I said, I've had to realize if you say if you say you're done and that's as far as you can go, Yah knows. And I guess in a sense, you do know too, in some sense, but I think Yah also understands that. Some people like that's enough. I'll give you a perfect example of why I can even say that. Remember when David and the men went out to battle? They had just went out to battle. When they went out, I want to say the Amalekites stole their wives and their children and their stuff. Somebody can correct me in the comments. Just I'm thinking that's right around the area. When that happened, when they were going to go back to retrieve their wives and their children, some of the men of whom which their wives and children got taken, they were too tired to go. They were like, I ain't got it in me. I ain't got it in me. And David said, hey, if you tired, if you did it, stay back. And the rest of the men went forward and they went back. They got the spoils. When they were coming back from battle, the men were like, so we about to give them, David said, we're going to split it equally. That was righteous judgment, right? The righteous judgment was they did not go because they didn't want to go, but had they went weak, not wanting to, whatever, they would have died. And he understood that. We have to also understand that from people. Sometimes what we want and how far we want to go is not for everybody, but it has to be on both sides. The people who are not going can't hinder, and the people who do go can't not share. That's how we have to understand as a community. But we get upset because we want to go further. Yah's taking us further, and we want everybody to participate in that process. I'm past that. But also the people who see a person going further, don't not encourage them. Don't not hold them up. Don't think it's a small thing, because you don't know what it takes for that person or where they're going and what they need to reach where they're going. But I'm not going to make where Yah is taking me a law for everybody else, but maybe it will provoke you. Maybe you might be like, dang it, I got one more in me. That's why we do things as a group. That's why we exercise. We're pack animals, if you will. So I want to put that there because it is the reality that some people progressed further in their relationship with Yah, in their understanding of Torah, in their healing and development. But Yah understands everything that has happened to every single person on this planet. And I believe with my whole heart that he judges according to that and how a person does their best. But I'm going to tell you this. We both know when we lay down at night if we did our best. Now, your 100% may look different from day to day, but you know if you gave what you could give to Yah. And when that thing rolls back and Yah says, so you didn't have no time for me, but you had 4 hours for TikTok. You didn't have no time for me and you had time to, that's where I think, and now granted, I'm not saying those things are wrong or whatever. I'm just saying when we say we can't or we don't have the capacity, oh, you had time to give to that man that was working your nerves. You had all this extra love and grace for that, but you couldn't forgive your sister. Like these are the things that we have to consider when we say, because why do we not have the capacity? Why could I not heal? Oh, I didn't give you an opportunity to heal. Oh, I was just terrible. We have to sit with that. So I just want that to be on our minds too. Everybody has a different capacity. Some of us are sent here to just do something a little bit. Some of us may be sent here to do something big, but in Yah's weight of things, they're the same. Your little may take way more for you to do than what somebody's big thing may take for them to do. So don't ever look at and try to break yourself out of your role or your capacity to try to do and be where somebody else is. Do exactly what Yah has set forth for you to do. And that makes a big difference because with just your quote unquote little, it could be everything for you and vice versa. So I just wanted to put that out there because I know it can seem a way when we're like, oh, yeah, we can do this. It's like, yeah, some people Shabbat is easy. For others, it's not. Food is an easy thing for me. Man, I'm doing some crazy radical stuff right now. Food is just, I'm like, but you know why? I've had an unhealthy relationship with food for most of my life. And so for me, even adding these different things is teaching me something different about food and my relationship with food and how I need to slow down and how I'm eating it and how it goes into my body. So that's what that is. Some people, food don't even matter. Like I'm throwing her out here, but I have an aunt of mine who she be forgetting to eat. Like, like, oh my, and then when she gets ready to eat, she goes, I need a protein. I don't be thinking that. I want to eat everything in the kitchen when I get hungry. I'm like, so those are just the differences between how we engage with elements and how Yah uses our experiences coupled with his law to become our own personal curriculum. And we have to be mindful of that when we're looking at or when we're dealing with other people and how we want them to engage and interact. Okay. What is really interesting too is the fact that when we think about the laws, like you said, some of us are in a concrete jungle, some of us don't have this, we don't have access to this. Sometimes things are for information too. Not everything is about us. And we do live in a Eurocentric, self-centered society where it's like, well, what does that have to do with me? But when we talk about the execution of the word, especially when we talk about being women, we have to also realize that we also have the responsibility of upholding the people who may be in those positions. So when you talk about how you judge leadership, how they should be doing it, if you're not a priest, you'd be like, I don't need to know that. But then if a priest is supposed to be bringing a red heifer sacrifice and he decides to bring something else, who is the person that places the checks and balances on what happens in the community? Well, it's the people who know and understand. In restaurants, especially restaurants that serve like clean food, kosher food, they have a person in the restaurant who literally monitors what comes in and out of the restaurant to make sure nobody brings anything in. They might not ever cook a meal, but it's their responsibility to know what should be coming in and out. Women, we have a responsibility of not only making sure we're proper partners for our husband, making sure they're accountable, but we're also raising young men and young women who will then be in those same roles. So we need to know everything because just let's say you might be raising the next Levite, you might be raising the next butcher for the community, you might be raising the next person who's growing food, who's doing business, and you have to be able to, as a person who sits in the one of the greatest seats of authority in our community, which is as a mother, you have to be able to hold that person accountable. We have women in our community and outside of our community, just talking about just in general, where we hold them accountable to small things, right? But then when it comes to Yah's Torah, we don't do the same thing. But what about when we say, hey, when I send you to that school, make sure you pay attention to that we put rules in place all the time. How much more so then should we put the rules in place for that person in service to Yah? When we think about it, like when we're raising young men, and them putting on tzitzit, young women, and then all of these things, like how do we act as the safeguards in community if we don't understand these things? Also, person can tell you, no, I offered the goat that was supposed to be. If you don't know what that looks like, how do you know? If you don't know what a goat is, what a lamb is, so when we even think about the laws, I was trying to run a list and I'll probably do it online, but like really, if we run through and say how many laws specifically apply to you, we think of like the whole conglomerate of what we have to do. Very few of them are the ones that are specific to what you have to do. The other ones are knowing them so you can hold people accountable. When you take a driving test, they tell you you got to learn how to parallel park, you got to learn how what the speed limit is in a neighborhood, a residential neighborhood versus on a street. And you're in your mind like, but there's signs. But what if there's not signs? Aren't you still accountable for the speed limit when there's not signs? Some of us have self-parking cars. You ain't gonna never have to parallel park a day in your life, but you still have to learn how to do it and demonstrate that you know how to do it just in case you end up in another vehicle. That's so much of what the law is too, is like, how would you be able to tell somebody how to do it if you didn't know how to do it? How would you be able to raise up the next generation? How would you be able to be a grandmother, an auntie, a sister, a friend in community? You may never become a Nazarite, but somebody else might. And how can you also not serve them food that they can't eat if you don't know what that is? Like spot on. Danielle said, ignorance of the law is not an excuse, because just because it doesn't apply to you is not right, because that's not a communal way of thinking. In a community, we don't just think about ourselves, we think about all the other people too. If you got a daughter who you know has been off a whoring with 50 million people and she want to marry a priest, you're like, baby, no, he can't marry you because Torah says X, Y, and Z. Like these are the realities that would have been the function of community. If you have a person who is, I'm trying to think, if they got soiled garments and you're like, oh, wait, you can't go in a temple like that. But guess what? If you come in here and bathe, I can give you another set, because this would have been how community would have functioned. And it leaves it, what it does in us all understanding is we then remove the punitive nature of the law for one another. If I can step in and get you before you do something wrong by saying, oh, hey, sis, we don't eat that here. You can't put that, you can't put the hog mog in the turkey, the greens, because that's not how we eat. Guess what? You just saved everybody else by getting to the person who is preparing the food. These are the kind of things that community does. And I think a lot of times we do them naturally. We just don't think about them. I love what I see there. Somebody said accountability. Yes, we're all accountable for one another. We don't want to be seen as, Avel and Cain. We don't want to be that group of like, oh, am I my brother's keeper? I ain't trying to be nosy. This is a nosy system, if you will, but it's not a system where you're nosy and you're putting down people. It's like, no, I got you. You got me. If you see me about to do something, you know it's a snare right there. It's a trap set. Tell me before I step in it. And we do it in love and in care and not to be punitive. That's where people got it messed up. Because I bet you if you worried about yourself, you probably have a lot less time to worry about other people too. So there's a balance in all of this as well. It keeps us in the right perspective as we're engaging in community, but it also allows us to not have our brothers and our sisters come back and say, but why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you say anything? If you saw me doing X, Y, and Z, why didn't you say something? It solves all of those problems, and it helps us not get in trouble with daddy, just like in the house. If you heard mama tell me to clean my room, why didn't you tell me? You knew she said she's gonna come home and whoop me. Why don't you help me? Why don't you say, hey, I'll help you. I don't want you to get a whooping. We have to shift into the mindset that it is one band, one sound, and one monkey can stop the whole show. Like that's just the reality. And so I just wanted us to put that in the back of our minds too. When we're thinking about this, it's it's not just about us. We're upholding everybody else in the community as well.